All right, so I think we can get started. Close to 4. So just curious, how many of you were in the session that Tim and I did earlier on HD Insight? Okay, so just a few. So we're going to basically take an entire hour and look at Data Explorer in quite a bit of detail. This is an overview session, so if you're not familiar with Data Explorer, that's fine. Although I suspect you've seen Data Explorer in a few sessions, at least. I've heard that every session pretty much had either Data Explorer or GeoFlow. So you've seen some of it. The goal here is to just show you the breadth of capabilities that Data Explorer has, and when you would use it, and what's so interesting about it. So introductions first. I'm Faisal Mohamood. I'm a PM on the team that's building and shipping Data Explorer, and so you'll see some of the things that we've been publishing and posting. So I may be familiar to some of you, and hope to continue to just push more out into the community. So how many of you have seen this slide? It's shown up quite a few times. Does anyone want to take a guess, folks at Microsoft not allowed, where Data Explorer fits into this picture? Anyone?
Excel. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, in here, which layer? Middle, yes. Data Explorer is all about connecting with the world's data. So if you think about the data platform, we've been in the storage business for a while, right? So in terms of relational, in terms of cubes, and in terms of non-relational and streaming, we've been doing that for a while. We've also been doing self-service BI for a while. So if you think about immersive data experiences, whether it's in Excel or or in places like SharePoint, bringing BI to the end user. And there's this chasm in between, right? This problem of really just getting the data into the tools that you are interested in getting it into. And so it's not just connectivity, but also the problem of shaping and getting data into the form that you want. So that's squarely the problem that Data Explorer tries to solve. There's quite a bit more that we're working on. So connecting with the world's data is not just about Data Explorer. There's more there that you'll see over the course of many months going forward. And discovery is another piece. So Data Explorer starts with the notion of allowing you to discover and find data. And so you have it today with the notion of being able to connect to external or discover external sources. We'll extend that out as well going forward. So thinking about the challenges, finding data is really, really hard, and this is becoming an ever-growing problem. It's even more pronounced now because there's just this explosion of data everywhere. If you think about public data, the wealth of data that's out there, and how much opportunity there is in being able to find and leverage that data, some of that is just lost because you're not able to find the data that you need. And even if you did know what data you wanted to connect up to, it's really hard to actually get to that source. So that's the first problem. The other problem is really, if you look at Excel today, just as an example, how many ways to connect to SQL in Excel? There's probably about 4. I counted 4, and I'm sure I missed a few. There's the data connection wizard, there's MS Query, there's the SQL connectivity in Excel. There's also SQL connectivity in Power Pivot, and they're all different. And it's just the nature of the problem space, right? Excel's been around for a while, and we've continued to add functionality, and the space has just gotten quite fragmented. What we're trying to do is really bring all of that together. So thinking about how would you, what do you do when you consume data? Most of the times you actually need to reshape it in some form. There's at least some sort of reshaping that most of the times you just need to do. Along with reshaping goes combining, right? You've got data coming from different places. How do you combine that in a meaningful way? And how do you combine that in a way that's easy to achieve? So this is one of the challenges that we're trying to tackle as well. this problem of depending on IT, it's something that we start hearing quite a bit, because as folks try to gain insights from data that's out there, most often they have to just go to IT and say, do this data integration for me, right? And it's always a problem, because the time to insight is it just takes that much longer. You just have to wait. The SLAs are not that good. It's frustrating for the end user. It's also frustrating for IT, because they're just getting overwhelmed with these tasks. And last bit is related to this dependence on IT. Whatever is done is usually one-off. If it has to be made repeatable, it just takes that much more effort. And so most of the times the requests are served one-off. And so those are the problems that Data Explorer is really trying to tackle. So 4 key elements, right? One, so let's talk about who Data Explorer is for. The way we are building this out, the experiences, is it's meant to be used by the breadth of Excel users, right? So we'd like for most of the Excel user base to be able to use this functionality. So it's meant, so we take quite a bit of care in making sure that the experiences are approachable by most. So 4 key aspects, right? One is the notion of discovery and connectivity to a range of data sources. So we have an ongoing investment, and it's just something that we take very seriously, is to expand the portfolio of data sources we connect to. And we'll get to the range of data sources in a bit. But then this notion of a very interactive and intuitive experience for building out your queries and shaping data. So if you've used Data Explorer with any kind of data source, including something as sophisticated as Hadoop, you'll see that the experiences that we have for building out your queries continue to be interactive, right? The notion of taking a text file that's tiny, sitting on your hard drive, and shaping that is the same experience you get with a 200 gigabyte text file sitting in Hadoop. It's just as fast, just as interactive, because the model is really based on the shape of the data. The third bit is consistency of experience. So Data Explorer goes to extreme lengths to make sure that if you're using a backend, a data source that is capable, that we leverage the data source as much as possible. So if you're doing group bys on SQL, that work gets pushed to SQL. But if you're doing the same thing on a text file, then Data Explorer compensates by doing that for you. And what you get at the end of the day is one experience, one set of capabilities across everything. And that, we think, is pretty cool, pretty compelling. And the last bit is merge across data sources. You can take data from anywhere, join it with data coming from anywhere. We'll look at some of that in the demos. So in terms of data sources that we support today, we've got, of course, the file-based data sources and just the standard set of data sources you know and love in Excel. So we can consume data coming from Excel workbooks, Access database, SharePoint list, SQL Server, SQL Azure, Windows Azure Marketplace, and OData. So, so in terms of core capability, this isn't new, but the experience is vastly better. Then we, of course, have the big relational databases, or the popular ones. In addition to SQL, there's Teradata, Oracle, DB2, Postgres, and MySQL that's currently supported if you were to download the preview today. We've also got Windows Active Directory, so connecting to an AD forest and pulling data about users, groups, machines. You can do that with Data Explorer. And then Facebook, of course. So these, you start getting into the non-traditional kinds of data sources that we have supported. And of course, flavors of Hadoop, Microsoft's own Azure HD Insight, and vanilla Hadoop on-prem. Lastly, different forms of data that you can find on the web. So whether it's tables coming from a web page, or whether it's data gathered through web APIs. So support for actually parsing and using JSON or XML. So what I'd like to do for the rest of the talk is really just spend time in Data Explorer. Just look at some demos and see, look at what kinds of scenarios you can accomplish using Data Explorer. So let's take a look. Switching into Excel. How many of you have Data Explorer installed currently? Okay, that's pretty good. So on the Data Explorer tab, the first thing you see is the search button that basically allows you to get into public search from the web. So today we have basically gone and gathered about 2 million tables from Wikipedia, and the intent is for us to also connect up to Windows Azure Marketplace and let you find all of that data. And in addition, we are also growing that body of data substantially so that you'll be able to find all kinds of open data just through this online search. So here I'm going to actually go look for largest cities in Americas. And I get back a bunch of results, get a quick visceral experience for previewing some of the data that's out there. And if I find what I want, one click is all it takes for me to bring that data down into Excel. I've started with a blank slate here. I don't have anything in my workbook. And in one shot, I have data now landed on my sheet. Now, if I'm not happy with the shape of the data, I can go and filter and shape and do more query over it. But at this point, what I have is a query in my workbook. And this is really important to understand. It's not just a static table that's landed in your workbook. It's actually a query. So we can go and start tweaking that query. So this is what the editor here lets you do, is build queries interactively. So let's go ahead and do a few things. Let's hide some of these columns. So I'm going to choose hide. And what you're seeing here is the transformations menu. So I choose hide and that's gone. And I'm going to open up the steps pane here so you can see what's going on as we do this. So let's say I want to turn these two into numbers because those are actually numeric values. So we change type to number. And now what I'm interested in doing so that I can better visualize this data, I want to create a new column which is city, comma, country. So we duplicate this column and we can take these two. So control select, right click and say merge. And we're going to use a custom delimiter and specify comma slash. That's it. We've merged those two columns. Let's rename that to city. Try that again, city. And I'm going to move this up here. And we are done. So I forgot to mention one thing. So let's go back into here. And one of the things that I wanted to point out is the fact that as we were doing our steps, we're building or as I'm doing each step in the query, Data Explorer is actually building a series of steps or transformations here. So this is what we call as the steps pane, and you can go back to each point and look at what the data was like after each of those steps. So anytime you go back to this workbook and go into the editor, this is in the workbook, you'll see it. And what it actually is behind the scenes is this expression, right? This is the truth. And at any point, Excel can run this through the Data Explorer engine and refresh your data. So this is a connected workbook that knows how to go back to the source and get your data. So we're going to go and say done. Now Data Explorer is refreshing. And we have an error. Why do we have an error? Let me go back a few steps. See, it actually landed the first time, and now it's not. So let's go back to the source. Try that again. So that worked. And now we're going to hide these two columns. We are going to change that to numeric. And I'm going to just test and see if that is actually what's, nope. Let's duplicate country here. And we are going to merge these two. Custom, comma, space. And I'm going to call that city. and I'm going to say done. No, it doesn't like it. But that shouldn't matter. And I'm going to say done. I don't think it likes me renaming that. But anyway, I think we have our data. It's just called merged. So assume that it's called city. And now all we have to do is really go into Power View and look at to just visualize this data. Anyone know what the largest city is by population in the Americas? Take a guess. Yes, Sao Paulo it is. So let's do that here. Merged and population, and we are going to do a map. And let's remove the color, country, and there we go. Brazil. So it's not, something's up with the actual, nope, sorry, this is it. The name throws me off. There we go. Right? Again, merged is city. So that's just how easy it is to go from a blank slate, find some data, land it into Excel, and visualize it all in one shot. And along the way, we had to clean up the data and tweak it a bit so that we could get to this visualization, right? So that's search, land, visualize, as one basic path. So the next thing I want to do is actually then look at how easy it is to connect to an existing data source that you know of, right? So search is great, but what if your data source isn't there? So as an example, what I have is data.gov. Anyone use data.gov? There's quite a bit of interesting stuff here. And open government data is hit or miss, right? Lots of agencies publish data just because they have to. And it's enough for them to put the data out there, and they've met the need of publishing the data. So what you often find is data is not in the shape that you want to actually use. Data.gov has quite a bit of good ones. The worldwide M1 earthquakes past 7 days is actually a pretty neat data set. So we can let's try and explore this data a bit and get a pointer to the raw source. So they publish this as a CSV. I can copy a shortcut and come back into Data Explorer. Let me start a new instance of Excel, and we're going to do from web. Now, from web is not just for HTML. Anything that's accessible via a URL, you can just go from web. So that's something to keep in mind, and I'm going to paste in my URL here. And what we get back is some text. And we can start shaping this away. So let's start turning that into a table. We see that it's comma delimited. In most cases, CSVs will come through as a table. In this case, we're not getting the right content type back from the source. So you have to tell Data Explorer to shape it using or split it using a comma. Now you can notice that the first row is a header, right? So let's use the nifty operation of using first row as headers. And we're getting somewhere now, so let's hide a few columns or keep just the ones we want. So lat, long, date, time, and magnitude. And we're going to hide everything else. Okay? Now, the date column here is interesting because it's formatted in a way that isn't readily consumable. There's weekday in there, there's UTC in there, and so we want to clean this up before we can actually get it into Power Pivot or Power View. So we can use the split operation, split by delimiter, and you get all kinds of options here. You can split at the occurrence of each, or you can just say split at the first to the last. So I'm going to split at the first and split on space. Great, so we removed the weekday. Now let's do the same for the last bit here. So let's split again, and once again by delimiter, and do by space at the rightmost. Now we can just change that to a date time, and changing it to date time here now will establish that type and flow that type information straight into Power Pivot and Power View, and so you get the right behavior. Let's hide these columns. And finally, let's call this date. We have lat, long, and magnitude, and we want to change those to numbers. And let's call this query earthquakes. And we can say done. So now, again, Data Explorer is evaluating the entire query based on those rules. We have 1,100 rows downloaded, and we can push this straight into the data model. I didn't mention that button or the link down there, load to data model, just tells Data Explorer to push the entire data into the X-Velocity engine in Excel. So now the data is ready for use. If you were to go into Power Pivot, you'll see that the data has been loaded in there. All of the types match because we established the types in Data Explorer. It's ready to go. So this case, let's look at what the visualization for this data set looks like. And GeoFlow is perfect for this type of visualization because you're looking at earthquakes that happened over the last 7 days. You want to get a sense of the magnitude and also what's happening, what's happening through time. So let's pick lat long, map that. And this is actually, every time I look at this, it scares me because a few of us live in Seattle, and we try not to look at this too much. But on the flip side, Southern California or Alaska is way scarier. So we'll find some refuge in that. And it's pretty cool because they keep this up to date, and you can kind of see the hot spots. But it gets even better if you add the magnitude. So now you get a sense for how big some of these tremors are. And of course, we are not having enough fun yet. So let's look at that over time and play the whole thing. Right? It's pretty cool. Again, going from a blank slate, connecting to something that's out there, cleaning that up because it's not in the right shape. It can never be in the right shape. Getting it into Excel and GeoFlow and visualizing that. I think that's pretty neat. Any questions so far? Yeah.
What if you have to log into the site to get to the source?
We support certain kinds of authentication mechanisms to be able to log in. So today we have the basic types of auth. We are looking at expanding that further. So if you have forms-based auth, we don't support that yet. It's just something that hopefully will be coming in the future. Yeah.
When you brought your table into Power Pivot, does it store the data in there as a table as well as in Power Pivot?
You can always. So that's a good question. The question was, when I brought the table into Excel, and Power Pivot, does it store the table in both places? You can always turn on or off the. There's a few things you can control. So enable download, the button that you see there tells Data Explorer whether or not it should be downloading anything at all. Now this is important if you're creating queries and you have intermediate queries that you're not ready to execute and fill yet. The load to worksheet is the other piece. Now if you ever exceeded 1 million rows, Data Explorer would automatically turn that off because you cannot have more than 1 million rows on the sheet, but you can always fill whatever comes back into Power Pivot, so you have that flexibility. So now we are going to look at an interesting case. So the third story that I have is, it's a fun one actually, just recently did it. So Gapminder, do I have it open? No, I don't have it open. Let's do it. Gapminder has quite a bit of interesting data sets about GDP, about about income per capita or body mass index and so on. And so it's really fun. If you've seen some of the talks that Hans Rosling does on on looking at health, looking at GDP, looking at population and how different countries do over time. So I thought we'd take a quick look and see how how we can replicate some of that. and let's go and find some of that data. So what I want to do is actually look at, for the last 20 years or for the last 30 years actually, look at body mass index, so an indicator of health, look at income, and look at population, and look at the trends over time. So if you were to go and find a data set from here, say body mass index, let's steal the URL and take a look at what we get. So in Data Explorer, we go from web, paste the URL in, and navigate to the first table. So that's not atypical for the kinds of data that you might find on the web. It's nicely formatted as a report, and anyone looking at this in Excel can kind of make sense of it, but what's the problem? Anyone? Anyone know what's wrong with that format? It's really hard for anyone to, it's really hard for anyone to use this in Power Pivot or for analytics. It's great as a report. So one of the things we recently did in Data Explorer is allowing you to basically take these columns and in one click turn it to that. Right? I think that's cool. It has, we've only recently done it. It's available for for use. You can get it in the latest bits of Data Explorer we published last night. So if you have an older build, go get the new one. But this is is one of the most exciting features we have I think released ever since we put the preview out there. So now let's start changing this around. So I'm going to call this year. I'm going to call that BMI, and I'm going to speed through this because we do the same thing for a couple more data sets. This is BMI, great, and let's change both of these to numbers, all right, and say done. And we're going to go back while that loads and get more. So we're going to get income, and let's do GDP per capita income. We should have it somewhere. Income per person, that's good. So let's copy that shortcut and go into the same thing, paste that in. I love doing this demo because it shows how easy it is to go and bring many instances of this type of data and just shape it, mash it up all in one go. I'm not having luck here. Let's try from web. There we go. Similar data set. So we're going to promote the first row as headers. This one actually goes quite a bit further back, 1800. So you can see that this table is really wide. Again, notice how long it takes for us to unpivot this. We're done.
Is there also a pivot capability? You have the opposite.
There is no pivot capability. The reason being Excel is currently pretty good at pivoting data, and so we thought this was much more important as the first thing to bring in. Pivot will of course be something that we will deliver in another release. So we're going to call this income, and we are going to change type to number. And one thing I'm going to do here is actually say I want to filter in this query and bring in only those greater than 1980. Right? And we have our income, and we're going to say done. So we have two. Let's get the third one. Of course, the demo gods are not with me today. Does not like me doing the filter. Let's do greater than 1979 there. Say done. Don't know what's happening. know, that is odd.
It's not that you didn't rename the first column.
No, it's not that. Though that is a good catch. And income. And we want to change the types of these. Let's try that. To number. And we want to say greater than 1980. Or greater than or equal to 1980. No, it does not like me. So I can't complete the visualization here. Well, let's do the merge though, because I still want to show you the piece that that Data Explorer allows you to do now. So we have BMI, and do we have? We don't have income. So let's get the third data set, which is population. Yeah, let's do population, and I'm going to go for the second page here and say population total. All right, let's try that. Copy the shortcut.
Do you want to try saving that though?
What's that?
You want to try saving instead of using the web, take the file local?
Yeah, we could try that. Let's do that. We could save the workbook. Yeah, let's do that. So we'll save this as population into ctemp. I think we're having connectivity issues.
It looks like
That's what it feels like, right? Which means we are really going to have trouble with a lot of things here.
no, it may just be Gapminder. Do you have an existing model? Just use an existing model to show it.
Okay, it's completed. Gapminder population XLSX. All right, so now we are going to try from file and ctemp, and let's do, where is Gapminder? Here we go. So we're going through the Excel file now. Again, notice the experience is identical. So we pick this table here, and let's do the same ceremony. Even more columns this time. So we are going to go all the way to the end, unpivot, and change. Let's rename this to country, rename that to year, rename that to population, and we're going to change type, go to number. Let's do our filter greater than or equal to 1980. Say done. We rename this to population and say done. Fingers crossed, everyone. That did work. So now we are going to merge and pick BMI, pick population. So this is the merge experience. This is the first time you're seeing this, most of you. And what it gives me is both the tables side by side, and I can actually pick the columns that I want to join. So I'm going to do a join between those two tables. And what you're seeing now is an interesting artifact. You will see this when you're trying to join local data with data that you're getting from outside, where it's telling you, hey, you're actually, looks like you're trying to cross boundary levels. There's a chance that some data that you have locally might end up, especially if you're merging, and think about calling a function, right, a service op over a no data feed. You might end up sending some data across the wire, so are you sure, right? And it's asking you what's the deal with this particular data set? Is it private? Is it organizational? You get to tell it, and then it'll do the right thing. So now I have a new table with a lookup column, really, that allows me to pick the value from the second table. And now I have my merge table, right? It's that simple. Doesn't matter what kinds of data sources you're actually mashing up, always the same experience, and you end up with this sort of an experience to get a mashup. So that's the third piece that I wanted to show. Unfortunately, I can't do the, we'll end up burning quite a bit of time doing the income and doing the visualization. But I'll try and write a blog post about how to do that and publish it. So we haven't really looked at how to connect to web data. And this particular one, I was actually looking for airports in the United States. And I ran into this data set because Tim and I were trying to do this other demo for his talk. And let's take a look. This is the particular table. And let's see what happens when we try to bring this in. There are some interesting challenges here. Some of you may spot it, but we'll surely see them soon. So from web, paste in the URL. Network. Okay. So we get back a bunch of tables. I can start to click on the tables that we pulled back and see if any of them match the ones that I want. So this looks close enough. That's exactly the table that I want to tweak and use. So if you take a look at the city column, though, it's interesting, right? Because looks fine on the web page. Made sense to put Alabama, Alaska up there in the city column, but when you look at the data here, I can't use it as is. What if actually what I want is city as one column, state as one column, right? So let's see how we can do that. I'm actually going to insert a custom column because I want state, right? And what I'm going to do is basically say if any of these other values are null, right, which is what we have in our table, then let's pick city, else null. Say OK, and here's that column. We'll move it up front. Let's call that state. And now I'm actually going to go into the library, the Data Explorer library of functions. Now, if you look at the spec for, we have a reference document that we published, which is the entire set of functions that Data Explorer supports. It's quite a bit more than what you see through the UI, right? Because we didn't want to overwhelm the user with all the functions in this UI. So what I'm going to do is actually add a new formula, add a new step. So let's open this up. Add a new step and type in a function. We have a function called table.fillDown, which, given the table that came, that was produced in the last step, renamed columns, we are going to do a fill down on that table and specify that we want to fill down state. And it's going to fill down till it finds the next value, and then it's going to fill down with the subsequent value, right? And finally, a handy transform is capitalize each word. And we have the table exactly as we want it, right? Except we should also probably filter out the nulls. So that kind of goes to show you how much you can actually do with the system, because it is so flexible. The library, the set of library functions that you have, there's quite a few primitive functions. When you piece them together, you can do something like that. And I think that's pretty cool. And it didn't take me a lot of time to realize that this is actually just a custom column, a fill down, and that's it. So we can go deeper into HTML and the language, and that's what my next piece is. So look at more HTML. Any questions while we do that? Yeah?
So, and after you've done this work, and you hit refresh and rerun the query, it's reproducing those steps every time, and you get that data back. You can refresh that data, and it reformats it every time.
Correct. So the question was, what happens when you hit refresh? Is it, is it redoing the steps that, that we performed, and, are you getting the current data every time? The answer is yes, because what we are producing is the actual, set of steps. It's the formula, right, that can be run anytime on demand. You can run it in Excel today. In the future, we hope that you can also run it in SharePoint when you have a document that's published, right? So it just fits into the refresh pipeline that Excel has. In fact, it's all based off of the Excel's connection model. So all you have to do, going back into my workbook, where are we? Oh, I closed it. But what you can do is you can just refresh from the data tab, and it's going to refresh everything. Because all Data Explorer is doing is dropping a new connection based on the Excel connection model into your workbook. So it's nothing new. We've made it convenient for you to just go here and refresh, but it's just going to use the Excel refresh based off of the Excel refresh in the back.
Possibly make that a little font a little bit bigger for us people with that. Thank you.
Does that help?
That's perfect.
Sorry about that. So now, yeah.
Now, if you posted this Excel workbook to SharePoint, could someone be able to go to it every day and have it refresh?
Oh, good question. If you posted it into SharePoint, would someone be able to go and refresh? Yeah, so a person will be able to go into SharePoint. They can download the workbook today, given where we are. They can download the workbook. If they have Data Explorer, they can refresh, provided they have credentials to everything that the data source, all of the data sources involved. We are working on also enabling automated refresh. So when you publish it into SharePoint, it just plugs into the automated refresh capability that that the entire that SharePoint analysis services all have, right? So that's the progression.
Can you use this to read a file out of email?
Out of email. So when you say that you want to read an attachment that came in saved off to
CSV.
Yeah, absolutely. So CSVs will, when we actually downloaded the Excel file, we went into this menu and we actually did from Excel, but we could have done from CSV, from XML, from text, right? You could even have raw text. I'll show a case where, depending on some rules, we're just processing raw text.
I think he means go hit an email
Message.
subject and then deref the file.
I see. So you want to actually take the email itself and access it. We don't have that today, but we know somebody here has been asking for that for a while, to be able to read from email. It's something we'll do in the future.
What about
Good question.
a website that has a table that requires user credentials to get to?
Can you repeat the question, please?
I want to pull a table off of a website, but I have to have user credentials to get to the table.
Get to the table, get to the website, you mean? Yeah, so we support certain forms of authentication today, and we'll expand that in the future. Today, forms-based authentication, which is the most common request we get, isn't supported. So if you have to go to the site and type in your username and password, we don't have that just yet. All right, so let's make this a bit more interesting. This is a good case. It's boxofficemojo.com showing you all of the movies released in 2012. And think about this data. It's actually 100 movies per page, and it's spread out across multiple pages, right? Can we actually use Data Explorer to take this and treat it as one big table of just the movies? So that's what I'd like to show you next. We are going to go in here, say from, let me first yank the URL for one of these pages, and we're going to say from web, paste that in, and look at the table that we get back. So table 0 isn't it? table 1 looks like the one we want. And it's actually pretty close. There's no tweaks that I want to do here. Maybe scroll down to the bottom and see, oh, there's a bit of summary that I don't need. So we can just tweak this and say keep the top 100 rows, right? And that gives me just the set of movies for one page. And let's call that movies. Now, I'm going to actually look at the function here, or the formula here, and notice that the URL is parameterized, right? So what I'd like to do now is use the language, the Data Explorer formula language, to go and pull data from multiple pages. I'm going to copy this expression, and we are going to create from other sources a blank query. We're going to go at it on our own. So going into this empty formula, we're going to paste that in. And the thing that I'm going to do is turn this into a function. So let's say given a page number, invoke that, and we have a little bit of work to do in basically saying this is really that ampersand page num, which is the value that we get back, number dot to text. So given a number, turn page num into text, and then concatenate with the rest. And I think that's it. So let's say done. And that's what a function today in the preview looks like, where you can actually invoke it. And let's try that with number 4. There's the 4th page, right? And so we have our function. I'm going to call this get page, and we are going to say done. Now, going back in here, now this is, I mentioned this a little while ago. If you're crossing security boundaries, so you have local data, you're calling a service out there, one of the things you want to keep in mind is this button, which basically says if you enable this, you are, and you really have to understand the implications of this button, because you really want to use it only if you're okay with some of the data, especially in our case, page numbers being sent to the external service. We're okay with that, so we're going to say enable, and now we are going to go and write a blank query, and we are creating a list of numbers. So let's say I want, that's one way to create a list, is list of 1 through 6, and I can start to do a thing here where I say I want to turn that into a table. And now I'm going to add a custom column. And this example is a little contrived, but it shows you the power of the language and how you add custom columns based on a function. So we're going to take the value in the cell and call the function getPage with the value in column 1. And I'm going to say OK. And now we're actually making a call out. Right? It's going to churn for a little bit. We've gotten 4 rows back. Each one is a page. And we can now use this expand notion to go and pull everything out, right? Because we've just flattened that table that we got back. And we can hide these columns. And if you look, we're looking at all of the data scraped from the page, or from the web page, right? From the series of web pages, brought it down into Excel. Yeah, I mean, it's best suited for tables right now. And what we did was really had a function that, given a page number, went and pulled a page. And we did that 6 times and gotten a single table out of it.
What happened if there wasn't a page 6? You had 6 in the list?
You would basically get errors, either errors or nulls. I think you would end up with errors and, in some of those columns, and you could filter those out. All right, so the next thing that I have is look at text files, but formatted in a slightly different way. You may have, you may run into some of these types of data.
Question.
Oh,
Before, just one question. So you don't support authentication, but can I log into my site and then call the web page? Would that work?
Clarify the authentication.
the question was, can you log into your website and use Data Explorer to
Use the web URL after I've logged in.
So it depends on what kind of authentication. So on-prem, we support Windows Auth, right? So you'll be able to, so within your intranet, if it's Windows Auth, you'll be able to do that. If anything requires custom authentication, you will not be able to do that today. So that's just given where we are, we won't be able to. Yeah.
Well, I mean, same idea, but, obviously enabling a cookie or say, remember me or something like that, that's not working because you're coming at it through a sub-interface, or how are you going at the web page?
We're just using, so we are actually underneath using Internet Explorer and instantiating IE and programmatically calling out to the web pages. But we're not reusing any identities that you may have established currently. So that's just how it is. So, but it's pretty clear that given the number of times it's come up here, something we've got to go look at.
Will that be in tomorrow's release?
Yes.
Can you do something if the table you want is the result of a search? Like if you made a search and then you got the table and it's like
Anything that can be, so today the question is, can you pull in tables that are results of searches? I think so long as you can express, through the formula language, whether it's parameterized through the URL, for example, and if you know how the search results will come back, whether it's hard to generalize, right? Because you may end up getting 5 different tables from a search. Which one do you really want?
But you can use the Bing API. You can write a formula with the Bing API with the API key.
Okay, so that was a good point that Tim mentioned. If you're actually looking for something like Bing search, then you can certainly use the Bing API, for example, to invoke search and get back more structured results than HTML tables. So tweets. Anyone know what that is? What's the format here? JSON. Yes. So want to show you what it looks like to consume JSON, and it's perfectly fine if you're consuming a single JSON record, which is usually the case if you're calling into a web API. This is a bit more involved because it's line-oriented JSON. So in this case, we have multiple records in this given file. So let's go and open from text and go look at tweets.txt. So there's the raw list of lines that we pull back. And what I want to show you is how you can now take this semi-structured data and turn it into something more meaningful. So we again start through the process of turning a single column into multiple columns. So we first turned that into a single column table. And now in Data Explorer, there's a transform that you can do, which basically tells the system parse this as JSON, which gives me list of records or a single column of records, and I can actually peek into that by clicking on on here. Now this expand thing is what you're going to use if you want to turn any structured column into into more columns, if you want to flatten it. So we've gotten more shape out of this, basically a file of raw JSON into a table. Now, given that JSON can be hierarchical, this notion of structured values within columns actually makes a lot of sense, and and works really well because you can continue flattening your way down and hiding things that you don't need, for example. And so this works out pretty well. So let's go in here and say we want to pull screen name. Do we have screen name? I think we have screen name. And pull name and followers count. And let's also fix this up by saying I want to split this column by delimiter, again by space, the same kind of experience you saw before. And I can now take these three and say merge those based on a space, right? And now we have our date column. I can hide the others. And very quickly you'll realize you're actually building quite a few number of steps. And one of the examples I like to show of this particular schema is a file sitting in Azure HD Insight. We have a sample file that we use which is about 120 gigabytes. The experience for doing this is identical. We would not wait any longer per step because all Data Explorer is doing is really looking at a preview of data, just a small subset based on the shape, allows you to transform, and then when you're done, just fill that in. Questions on that? Yeah.
I played with it a little bit, and exactly what you just mentioned became a problem because I had a problem on a record down in the number 50,000. So while I was transforming, it was fine, and then when I hit done, got a problem with data type mismatch. And what are your sort of roadmap plans to actually make? Because eventually I had to actually crack open the data source to figure that out myself because it wasn't giving me a good error message.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So what happens if something goes wrong, after getting 50,000 rows, or what's your plan? What's on the roadmap to help address some of those issues? So that is actually, it's not super common, but we do run into those issues. We have worked on many of those cases to make sure that when those situations happen, your entire results aren't blown away, right? You actually end up with an error in a cell. So some of the things we're trying to do is help you figure out where those things happened, and to help you understand what's the exact set of errors that happened. Now, the other thing that we've talked about, again, this comes when we do more automated refresh and things like that, is to provide more visibility into the kinds of errors that happen when there's a refresh overnight, and to help the owner of that data set go and address some of those problems. Given the model, you are going to run into some of that, right? And it's not unique to the model, it's just depending on the size of data you're dealing with, that's just a reality, right? And we'll do things to help smoothen that out. Any other questions? Okay, I think we're almost out of time anyway. I'll hang around and let me see. There's maybe a couple. Yes, just one little slide here, which is, if you don't have Data Explorer already, go to microsoft.com/bi. You'll get it. If you have been using it, make sure you get the latest build. We put one out last night. It's got unpivot. It's got lots of bug fixes. It's got better support for web APIs, better search. So it's all goodness. And send us feedback.
Maybe a little tangential, but what happened to Project Barcelona?
What happened to Project Barcelona? Good question. We are actually part of the team that, a part of our team used to work on Project Barcelona. Some of the notions that we were trying to build out in Project Barcelona, we continue to work on them. We don't have anything that that we can share at this time, but it's not far-fetched to imagine that some of the things that I mentioned, discovery and being able to help you know more about the kinds of data that you're using, that some of those are things that we continue to work on. Oh, we didn't. Yeah, so Data Explorer already has that capability where if you if you look at from folder in here, so let me quickly show you. From folder is exactly what you're talking about, which is take a directory and subset that down to the list of files you want based on the same experience, the same filtering experience, and in one click you can turn that into a logical file, one file, and tweak, refine, and load that into Excel.
And then I guess, is this going to turn into the replacement for SSIS?
So is this going to turn into the replacement for SSIS? We think about it slightly differently, right? Because the audience that this is geared towards is just different, right? So we've talked about, I mean, that it's, there's humor in the question. One of the capabilities that's often asked is, can someone use this to build a package and deploy that? And so we have been looking into that possibility.
Does the unpivot function work with Excel 2010?
The question was, does the unpivot function work with Excel 2010? Nothing that you've seen here, except for this one little link, load to data model, is specific to Excel 2013. Everything works in Excel 2010. Now, I cannot talk to, going forward, whether everything that you're seeing here continues supported in Excel 2010. We're still, figuring out where some of these things will land. Today, if you were to go and download the preview, all of it works. There's no difference between the experiences.
Can Data Explorer go back into Excel cells? So, for instance, to get some parameter
Into Excel cells, the question was, can Data Explorer look back into Excel cells? Data Explorer can look into Excel tables. So if you have a table on a spreadsheet on one of your worksheets, you can use that as a data source. There's no specific capability to peek into a particular cell.
you have a lot of URLs in there and then use that.
Correct. Yeah, you can put a table in Excel through the same shaping experience in the workbook. I mean, an external workbook, of course, you saw how we pulled that in. Yeah.
So you said the large data model, I can't understand that. If you install Power Pivot on Excel 2010, that get enabled?
Not if you, so in it, the capability here, the load to data model relies on the Vertipack engine that's natively integrated into 2013. So the way to get to it is fundamentally different than what you have with the add-in in Power Pivot. What you can do in 2010 is go into Power Pivot, and as I mentioned, all Data Explorer does is set up a connection, so you can go into Power Pivot and pull on that connection to load Power Pivot. Yeah. Okay.